Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Media Moments 2022 launch special. On this, the final episode of the season, we've got 3 fantastic guests in for our live launch of the report. Don't forget that you can still download that report, though, by going to voices.media/MM22. Now, this is the final episode of the season, but we will be back in the new year with another look at all the news and the views from the media world. But for now, please enjoy this episode, the live launch of the Media Moments 2022 report, and have a very, very happy holiday period. First of all, thank you to everybody who's taken the time to come here for this, the live launch event for Media Moments 2022. This is a report that we do every single year. It looks back at all the key media moments that we found from the past year. Why do we do it? Well, for one thing, it's a nice way to anchor ourselves in all the events of the past year, because everything in media moves so damn fast that often we forget what has taken place this year versus what's taken place 4 years ago versus what's taken place last month. So, for instance, Elon Musk, not to tank the stream already by talking about him, only took over Twitter just over a month ago. And since then, everything has been upended. In fact, when we were writing some of this report, we had to rewrite it on an almost daily basis based on what was going on around that. But the report itself is a labor of love from myself and my 2 Media Voices co-hosts and co-founders, Esther and Peter. We're going to be sticking around for the entire session. We're going to be having a discussion first, and then we're going to be bringing in some guests. But the report itself will be sent to an email as soon as this event has wrapped up. Or if you're listening to this on catch-up, you can download it by going to voices.media/MM22. Thanks to our friends and partners at What's New in Publishing for being partners again for this 5th year of the report. And thank you so much to our friends at Poool for sponsoring and making this possible. Poool is the membership and subscription suite and all-in-one platform for digital publishers to convert, manage, and retain their members and subscribers. You can find out more about them at poool.tech. That's POOOL.tech. Or you can follow them at their new B2B publication, which is theaudiences.com. The 3 of us are going to present our top media moment from the report itself, after which we're going to invite our panel to join us for a wide-ranging discussion. So we're joined by Carolyn Fenner, who is BuzzFeed's commercial director for EMEA, AdWeek's Europe bureau chief, Stephen Lepitak, and Poool subscription and digital revenue consultant, Ludivine Paquet. So thank you again to the Interactives team at City University, who are also covering this launch for us. Peter, I think that we actually have a little announcement again before we begin.
I mean, so one of the things that we want to do with this report is actually get it out and start helping people understand what we think we got from it and what we got from the other people. So we're going to have, I don't know, what do you call it, Esther? Workshops or presentation sessions, whereby we'll introduce the report, tell people all about it, and let people ask questions. And that way we can maybe extend the reach of the report. And to be crass and commercial about it, make some money. Hey! Anyone that wants anything to know any more about that, just get in touch. We'll put it on the website and we'll follow up probably by this point in the new year.
It's on the website already, Peter. I've been really organised today.
Well, I was on the motorway. I just got off the M74 about 15 minutes ago.
Well, we appreciate you taking the time as well, Peter. So one of the things that we always like to do when we go through the report is to pick out our own key media moments as the report's authors. And Esther, I think yours is particularly pertinent because this year's seen so much upheaval in and around local news, not just in terms of business models, but actually in terms of how people are using local news to really deliver upon that promise of journalism and what it actually means to the public.
Yeah, so hopefully that screen has come up. I think actually all 3 of our points are quite positive this year. This makes a change. So I've been really excited by what's been a bit of a kind of local news revolution this year. We've seen an awful lot of change in how local news is covered and delivered, not necessarily in the last 12 months, but sort of it's been building up to over the last sort of 5 to 10 years. And the creator economy has actually driven quite a lot of it. We've seen a lot of digital tools that have been created to serve a lot of sort of creatives that have meant that small teams or even some people on their own can suddenly launch a local news outlet and easily monetize it. We're seeing a huge rise in newsletter first or even newsletter only outlets, which either monetize through ad revenue or have support and donation systems in place. One example, if you're in the UK, is the Manchester Mill, which has been really encouraging this year. Here in the UK, we've kind of struggled for a long time with a successful paywall model for local news outlets for various reasons. But these guys have actually really hit on something here. They became profitable just a few weeks ago, just before their second birthday. And that's from just 1,600 paying subscribers. And I kind of like that feeds into that idea of you only need sort of 1,000 true fans to be sustainable. They've now expanded into Liverpool and Sheffield using the same Substack first model. So that's been really great to see. But my top line finding, and the one I've got here, is I just thought showed some real hope and for the sector. And that's that median annual revenue for hundreds of local news organizations in the US went up by 33% last year. And I suspect this year we'll see a similar rise. So members of local independent online news at Lion publishers in the US showed median annual revenue rose from $94,000 in 2020 to $125,000 in 2021 on average. And actually increased member support was one of the main reasons for that. So that's my media moment, a nice positive one. Looking forward to see what happens to local news over the next couple of years. Yeah,
it really is. Do you think that they came up with the acronym LION before they came up with what it stood for? Is that a backronym?
I wouldn't want to speculate on that.
Okay, fantastic. But that's one of the things that we like to touch upon in the report is effectively that what do business cases, what do business models actually mean for journalism? And as with the Manchester Mill, one of the things that we've seen is people are really understanding now the value of having boots on the ground, of having local journalists who are actually embedded in those communities. So it's been fascinating to see that. And that's covered in depth in the local news chapter of the report. My media moment is moving on to audio. And so audio this year has been in a bit of a, I suppose, not a retreat, but sort of a reassessment of what audio means to publishers and to companies. So obviously we've seen huge investments in podcasting, in audio tools, in audio equipment over the past couple of years from the big publishers. And you only have to look at some of the stats to see why. No channel has grown faster than digital audio last year. Advertising spend in the sector grew nearly 58%, reaching $4.9 billion, according to the Interactive Advertising Bureau's most recent data. That's an awful lot of money that's being left on the table. And it also means that, happily, there is much more room for experimentation within the podcasting world. Per a 2022 Edison Research survey, 73% of the US population aged 12 and older, that's an estimated 209 million people, listen to digital audio, obviously including podcasts, up from 68% in 2021, and 67% listen to digital audio weekly, which is up at 62% year on year. That's a huge increase. Muckrack found that 67% of people are now actually recording videos of their podcasts. We've seen some figures that indicate that that is actually integral now to growing and maintaining your audiences in the podcasting space, and that an increasing proportion of podcasts offer exclusive content to some of their paying subscribers. And of course, when I say that we've taken a step back and had to do a reassessment, this is why, because all that money is flooding into it. And for a while, it was almost a wild west of people just plowing money in, making sure that they had content, but not really taking the time to experiment with monetization, with demonstrating to advertisers that you do actually get bang for your buck when you put money alongside podcast content. That's why we've seen some of the biggest players in the space making moves to control podcast audio. Obviously, Spotify have been on an acquisition spree in terms of content for years, but this year they also bought analytics and metadata platforms, as did Acast. And of course, the sleeping giant of podcasting, YouTube, has launched its own dedicated podcast tab. We've yet to see how that's going to develop, but it is fascinating to recognize now that podcasting has always been mature as a medium. It's always been a fantastic storytelling medium. But now for publishers, the real opportunity is in leveraging everything that we've seen those big podcast platforms invest in to really ensure that they are getting the most money possible from their podcasting and audio efforts. You'll always hear people say, oh, it's actually a sort of very low cost of entry medium. And while that's true, in order to do it right, you do need that great metadata. You need all those tagging, you need all that analytics. And it's fascinating to see quite how many platforms are investing in that now. In the report itself, we go into how some publishers are using audio, but this is Peter's favorite stat from the episode we did specifically around this. 55% of podcasters believe that there are too many podcasts. And I'm one of them. But Peter, in terms of, we spoke about podcasting and its inherent strengths, but in the episode, we also mentioned that it's very, very similar to newsletters in a lot of ways. So what are some of the big stats that you've seen, and what are your media moments around newsletters this year?
I think the big thing, and it was Mark Sternberg that said it on the podcast that we had, was that idea of normalization. I'd actually use a different word. I'd say professionalization. I think in the past, newsletters have been a bit of a bolt on, something that we do because everyone's doing it or because it's a good way to get traffic or whatever. And that's changed, I think. There's been that investment in standalone letters where people are abandoning click rates. Part of that was because of the Apple privacy changes, where the stats just didn't make sense anymore. But also, I think it's a personality thing that those standalone newsletters are developed as their own product. So the Guardian's a great example where they brought staff in, but they've delivered in a newsletter where it's that finite idea that we lost with social streams and rolling news on web pages. So that idea that you get it, it's in your inbox in the morning, you finish it, and then you move on. And I think that's a big part of what's going on with newsletters, particularly in the news field. I think what Esther just said about investment in talent, Atlantic's a great example. They did deals. There's no commitment to take those deals forward. I don't think that they're working maybe the way they wanted them to. The cost of acquisition on those newsletters seems really high. The deals that they did was basically people like Casey Newton. They did them a deal where if they brought their subscribers over, they would get paid a certain percentage of any new subscribers, and they would get paid fees. And I don't know that the numbers are working according to Nick Thompson. The last thing I saw from Nick Thompson, but they're investing, and that's the big part. I think that idea, newsletter first that Esther mentioned with local news, I think is everywhere. I don't think it's just in terms of local news. I think it's in terms of anyone that's publishing. They're really kind of going with putting original content straight into newsletters. That number that's up there, I can't actually see it, but I'm assuming it says 75%. Does it, Esther?
It does.
Okay, so Quartz did some research. Now, there was a whole thing about Quartz has gone back and forth. It got acquired, and then there was a management buyout. And was Quartz ever going to work? And on the numbers that they had around the paywall, it didn't look like it was working. But when they did some research, they realized that 75% of the people were actually opening their content directly in email. So they dumped the paywall, leaving them free to kind of build traffic and get more advertising revenue, but created a membership model specifically around their newsletters. And I think that is really, really interesting, where it really puts a different front end on that publishing operation. And I'm a subscriber. I hold my hand up. I am one of the people that subscribe to Quartz. And it's brilliant. It's really, really good in that sense. It does the job that it's supposed to do. I mean, the other thing that's going on in newsletters, acquisitions, Axios got bought for $525 million. Industry Dive, which is a B2B publisher, got bought for, I think, about 380-something million, 390 million. Publishers in the States, like 6am City, who are a news publisher, but they don't do hard news. They're launching every 2 months. They're launching a new newsletter every 2 months. So I think it's that idea of professionalization and newsletters falling directly into the publishing portfolio. And the good news is, here's the good news for everyone, we are launching a publisher newsletter awards program to sit alongside our podcast awards. If you want to find more about that, you can go, I'm going to forget the website and I can't look. It's
publishernewsletters.com.
There you go. Go to publishernewsletters.com and you can find all about it. We're looking to have the awards in July, and the entries will probably open sometime in March or thereabouts, I would imagine.
Yep.
So there you go.
So that'll be a fun one. We, as much as fun as it is to go through all of our entries to the Publisher Podcast Awards, I think the newsletter one will be fascinating as well, just because of the commercial aspects of it that you mentioned there, Peter.
How was that for flying blind?
Well, we've rattled through our own media moments, but I think it's important now that we get a slightly wider view from a panel of experts. And so we're delighted to welcome BuzzFeed's Carolyn Fenner, AdWeek's Stephen Lepitak, and Pool's Ludivine Paquet to discuss what they've identified as the biggest shifts this year and how publishers can prepare for what is likely to be another challenging 12 months ahead. Stephen, thank you for taking the time out to tell me off for mentioning Elon Musk not a minute in. But we've already seen that some of the big tech companies and even a few publishers now are making cuts as the ad market slows. So when we're talking about advertising, do you think this is going to be the start of a long, hard advertising winter as we grapple with global cost of living crisis and this kind of slowdown with the big holding companies that brings? Or is the market more resilient after the last decade of highs and lows?
How long have we got? Because that's such a huge question. So is it going to be more resilient? I mean, it really depends on just the impact that we're going to see from the cost of living crisis on top of everything else. What is always true about the ad industry is it's cyclical. These things will always come and go, turn around. But I mean, what we're seeing is the cost of digital ads have increased, a lot of it down to the scarcity of inventory when there was so much demand during the pandemic. That's seems to be ongoing, and as a result of that, we saw Instagram and Facebook, they raised their prices. TikTok has raised its ad prices as well, which is off the back of coming in pretty cheaply anyway, so that was always going to come. There's going to be a lot of different tailwinds for the industry to face, but I mean, a lot of it just comes down to just how severe the economic conditions are going to be. But when is that not the case in this industry?
Well, that's true. Do you think there are going to be any big winners and losers from this? I know that obviously at the start of the year, well, in fact, Q2, Zuckerberg said, we're basically bracing for some massive headwinds there. Do you think that it's going to be some of those huge tech companies who are exposed to advertising that will see some of the biggest falls?
I think Meta is quite a curious one to think about in terms of what it is going to experience, because it is looking so far down the line with its play on developing whatever it thinks the metaverse should look like, that you kind of think they're just throwing a lot of money into hoping this thing comes off anyway. So what they're going to do for the next 10 years, I really couldn't predict. But they really are going all in on whatever they think they're developing being a huge success. Let's not be too skeptical, shall we? So who are going to be the winners? What's been curious is, I mean, obviously we're going to talk streaming and the streaming platforms, Disney, Netflix. We've talked for years about when is Netflix going to add ads? Well, it's done it. We're there. And Disney Plus is probably a part of the reason why they've had to do that. But what they're doing is they're doing that having built up a really strong, loyal audience. Again, that comes down to how loyal will they be? Will that audience be? Can they afford to keep paying these subscriptions? But really, the advertisers should win because it's premium inventory with great audiences that keep coming back. So I think the streaming platforms will be pretty solid in terms of those. In terms of publishers, what will be exciting, and I do mean exciting, is to see all the different strategies that come out of. I mean, we're always talking about how our publisher is going to make money, how they're going to drive revenue, and there's always new ways in which they do that. And we've been seeing a lot around how they've incorporated more events and trying to build subscription products, as Peter was talking about, including newsletters. I think it's going to be exciting to see all the different ways that publishers really do innovate in order to bring in money, because no one should be depending on digital ads revenue at all anymore.
Well, that's undoubtedly true, yeah. And you mentioned there, don't be too cynical about the about Meta and Web3. Well, unfortunately, that's basically the tone we've taken in the report. So if anybody wants some healthy cynicism, they can download that report after this. But Ludivine,
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, but Ludivine, the balance then between subscription and advertising revenue is always a tricky one to balance. What would your advice be to publishers who are looking to maximize ad revenue from casual viewers, but also encouraging prospective subscribers to convert?
Yeah, it's a very tricky question to dig in. And I say engaging your audience, it's a very good good thing to start with. We definitely see a downturn in ad-based revenue amongst our clients. So there is a willingness to develop diversified revenue streams and to have several ways of having digital revenues. And another interesting thing is that the average per user revenue is definitely higher through subscription. However, there are many steps between converting an anonymous user to a subscriber. So I'd say the first step for a publisher is to understand its different users' profile by segmenting the audience and analyzing the different group conversion rates. From there, you can really start to understand your audience and to test which one would be the best action to suggest to each one of your different segments in order for them to convert later. So for very volatile user, it could be relying on ad-based revenue, and for a very engaged user, it could be relying more on subscription-based revenue. So I would say it's all about having the right message to the right user profile. And with our clients, we're definitely trying to do that. And the best way of doing that is through testing many different actions to your audience segments. And another important thing is also to understand the value of each and every actions that you're trying your viewers to do. So it means understanding what's the worth of an anonymous user, seeing some advertising, and what's the worth of a new newsletter subscribers as well as a subscriber. I would say we do have a lot of work to do on that, to very understand the value of each action in order to have a good balanced revenue stream, and it would be easier for publishers to make good decisions based on what's the value of each and every action. So I would say segment, test, and engage over time.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Touch on that idea of kind of, I suppose, recognizing the value of audiences and the value of users. Caroline, one of the things that has come up a lot at the sort of publisher events this year, and I know you've been on quite a few panels, is this idea that publishers are starting to kind of reduce the number of ads. Some are even turning off programmatic in favour of serving, in favour of their first-party data advertising. This seems like a positive move for publishers to make. But I suppose, is the age of that sort of cheap, programmatic-driven digital advertising over, or is this just a temporary trend before we figure out kind of the next best thing to third-party cookies?
Everyone would love that to be the case, wouldn't they? I think it's the absolute dream. And if we could turn off the open marketplace, I think everyone would jump at the opportunity. I think the problem that we've got is that we're quite embedded in this space. And, even looking at Bloomberg the other day when they announced that they were turning off all open marketplace sort of revenue, of that revenue, their overall revenue, it was only 5% came through the open market. So it's very, easy. It's very easy for them to prioritise user experience when you've got a huge subscription base and only 5% of your revenue is coming through the open market. When the open market accounts for 40+% of your advertising revenue, it's really difficult to make that call. And I think that it has to come, do you know what? If I could sell all of my inventory, like all of my display inventory via direct or PG or PMP, of course I would, but that has to come from the advertiser and the client side. They have to make that choice and they have to say, actually, we're moving away from the open marketplace. And that then opens up a whole lot of questions. The ease of the open marketplace, the cost, there's so many benefits to the open marketplace still. And it's that weighing up the brand safety. It's weighing up, transparency and having direct conversations with brands, knowing where your ad's going to run versus cheap, easy, mass spitting out ads everywhere. And I think that this is a problem that we've got, is that so many people and so many media owners, so many publishers are still so reliant on the open marketplace revenue.
that you mentioned that about brand safety there. Are you finding block lists is still a big issue? I know it's something we spoke about quite a lot during COVID-19, but is that still a problem you're seeing these days?
Yeah, I mean, definitely, certainly it was at the week, and HuffPost definitely to an extent. And I think that, you know, I was on a panel a little while ago, and you know, there's so many, you know, not being able to have anything when the Queen was mentioned, you know, during that time, or like, you know, not mentioning COVID or Trump, or, you know, when you're reliant on advertising revenue, as so many news brands are, that hurts. That really, really hurts. And, you know, I always tell this story, and it's an old one now, but it's not even that old. It's probably about a year old. But, you know, I was talking to someone, and they said that an advertiser wanted to block World Health Organization. So anyway, they're looking at this PMP, and they can't work out why it's not working, and they're doing digging. And it turns out that they've blocklisted WHO instead of World Health Organization. So they've blocklisted WHO. And, you know, obviously not naming names or anything, but I mean, that's crazy. Like, you can't be doing that in 2022. You can't be, like, you know, making that mistake. And this is hurting big, you know, this is really, like, hurting really brand safe news publishers. They've got bills to pay. They've got really expensive journalists to pay. They're premium. They've got engaged, curious audience, and it's, you know, it's really painful. And I really feel for, like, the news, like the big news brands, because it's happening all the time. And I think something's got to change there. I don't know what it is, and I know that Reach have got their own, you know, their tool that they're using, and it's around sentiment and different things. And I think that tech has got to get smarter to overcome that.
I think that's exactly right. And we had
Chris, just quickly, can I ask Caroline and Stephen and Ludivine, cookies, third-party cookies, been booted down the road. It's now gone to what, 2024? Are they ever going to go away? Just thinking of that picture that Caroline painted at the beginning of that, is third-party cookies ever going away?
Why would you want them to? We've had so many wonderful years writing about them.
Being followed by a toaster around the internet.
They're the best thing. They make the internet wonderful. It's going to be interesting to see, will Google stick by 2024? I would not be surprised if it doesn't look as though they have an answer coming anytime soon. I think we're stuck with them for a while yet.
Yeah, I do agree. And, you know, I do think it's a good thing, because people are starting to think about, you know, first-party data, and, you know, Permative are doing, like, a fantastic job in the UK. And I think that, you know, we're going out of first-party data. Future do a great job with Aperture as well. There's loads of first-party plays. I just can't see there isn't a good enough alternative yet. Yeah. So, and I guess is that on Google to correct? I'm not sure. But
that must be so frustrating from a publisher perspective, because publishers have been ready for this for 3, 4, 5 years now, and every time Google kick the can further down the road, the kind of, I suppose, reaping the proper benefits of that also gets kicked down the road, right?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. I think that realistically, looking at the time, I mean, this is why we break the report out into separate segments, because we could talk about advertising alone for an entire hour. But moving on then to subscriptions, and Ludivine, there was a lot of concern from publishers, in particular earlier in the year, that consumers are going to cut subscriptions with those increasing economic pressures that are also impacting advertising spend. So is this something that you've seen starting to happen, or is kind of the market holding up at the moment?
Yeah, it's a very good point. The subscription fatigue is definitely a risk that we are seriously following, and we try to anticipate as much as we can. We have not yet seen any major change in the new subscribers acquisition rate. However, we strongly believe that retention and working on your users' loyalty will be one of the major challenges of 2023. And we're actually working right now to develop several use cases to answer this aspect with our clients. To give you a very an example, we are working with several publishers in segmenting their subscribers and segmenting subscribers with a very high propensity to unsubscribes. For instance, people with a credit card with an expiration date coming up. And by segmenting them, we're able to display specific messages and specific wording in order to reduce churn. So we're anticipating this this challenge through retention action. Most of our clients have, by doing so, their churn rate has decreased to over 25%. So I think we do have some tools right now to anticipate the situation, mainly working through retention. And there is a very interesting article in the Audiencers that is called Why Retention is More Important Than Acquisition. And I would definitely suggest reading it. It's a good and insightful tool to anticipate this retention challenge.
Nice, fantastic. One of the things that I think we should probably ask to throw this out to not just the panel, but to the audience as well, is Absolutely. As much as we'd like to think that news subscriptions occupy a special place in consumers' heart, the reality is that we're in competition for consumer revenue with everybody else who's doing a subscription play. So I'd just like to ask the entire panel, my colleagues and everyone in the chat, who do we think is doing subscription really, really well this year? Who is making themselves either through their comm strategy or through their product strategy completely safe in terms of being cut from consumers? Peter looks suspicious.
No one.
No, I've got one if nobody else has. And actually, this. Oh, all right, he's got one.
No, the point with that is that no one is completely safe because it's all about priorities. You know, people will prioritize news when there's a war or when there's COVID or whatever, and maybe they'll cut Disney or Netflix when times get hard. But that's a very personal thing. And I think that's exactly what Ludivine's talking about that messaging. The messaging strategies have got to change as circumstances change and as the audience changes. So to say that anyone is completely safe and will never have any churn, that's just never happening.
Can I tweak that slightly? I don't disagree. I just think it's more about value. And I think nothing else has demonstrated that more this year than the journey Netflix has been on. And Netflix, I'm just going to pick on because it's an easy one. It's kind of, it's the canary in the mine for a lot of this. When they lost 1 million subscribers in Q2, that was sort of, there were headlines all over the place. Subscriber wave is over. Subscriptions are dead. That's it. We're all screwed. And actually, I can remember discussing this at the time with you guys. Netflix had basically just had a season where it'd all just been a bit pants. Like they hadn't really brought anything new. Bridgerton had finished. There wasn't anything to watch. And as soon as their sort of autumn season hit, they've had record-breaking growth again for the last 2 quarters. And you just think, is that not in a nutshell just exactly what this subscription journey is about? Is that you've got to be valuable to your audience. You've got to have something that they want to subscribe to. And if the content starts to go down the toilet, so's the subscriptions.
Can I make a point about what you've just said, though? That is basically what traditional television's always experienced. Summertime, there's a lull. They don't put out their best content. Netflix has just become a traditional TV channel to me because that's exactly what they've just experienced.
You're thinking that we don't have that sort of, in fact, in our broadcast section of the report, we spoke about kind of maybe the replication of event TV on a platform like Netflix. Is that something that we think is going to be important? Those flashpoints, those, as Peter mentioned, those really important topics that we can build subscriptions around.
Charlotte Henry's got a really interesting view on this, where she talks about where you used to have that water cooler moment, which was you actually talked about the program, you talked about what you saw, and now the conversation is are you watching or have you seen, so that you can avoid spoilers. So that, the actual everyone watching the same thing together has changed because it's not together, it's that on-demand thing. But yeah, I think that was, what Esther's talking about is a Stranger Things phenomenon. I mean, who the hell would ever subscribe to Netflix to watch Bridgerton? Give me a break.
Why are you slamming Esther live on this? Okay, never mind. So Madhav has mentioned in the chat that Deniken in Slovakia is the smartest paywall publisher that he knows. Carolyn, Ludivine, do you have anybody who you think is doing subscriptions really, really well this year?
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry, go on. You can go first.
Go ahead.
We'll come to you first, Caroline.
So for me, it's there's obviously some interesting information around micropayments and how is that going to take off. I know that Brian Morrissey has recently written, he's written about it in the Rebooting newsletter this week. But do you know what's interested me when I've been looking is actually how you can link. And again, it's probably with my commercial mind, how you link advertising and subscriptions together. So actually, The Athletic have recently announced a partnership with Google. And this is all around women's sports. I don't know if you've read about this or heard about this, but Google are huge on women's sports, and they want to be ingrained in it. They want to be part of it. They want to champion it. They want to triumph it. And so what they've done is they've gone and spoken to The Athletic, and obviously there's a partnership and revenue exchange. And now what The Athletic are doing is they've hired journalists. They're going to go deep into this space, but they're going to do it because of the Google partnership. So it's opened them up to this new area because of this revenue, which you could call partnership revenue or advertising revenue or any form of revenue, but it's allowing them to put content in front of the paywall that in turn could actually lead to more people signing up and driving subscriptions. And you can see it with the Washington Post as well. They've done something with Barbie where they've offered free subscriptions to a certain audience. And they also done it with, I think it was Morgan Stanley as well. I think, was it Morgan Stanley? Morgan Stanley with a financial series that they've done in front of the paywall to encourage people to sign up. So this is an advertising play that links back to subscriptions. And I think it's really important because, if you know what your business model is and you're set on, advertising teams can talk about driving subscriptions, and marketing teams within businesses can talk about advertising, and there should be a fluid conversation between both.
Perfect. And Ludivine?
I think we do have a quite interesting example in France. It's an economic magazine that is called Alternative Économique, and it's a good example, quite interesting because so they changed mainly three things, and their conversion rate actually increased by 40%. And the three things they changed is that they really worked on their engagement strategy. So whenever you would go to their website, the first action that was asked was to leave your email in order to access first free content. So they work soft conversion. And then the second page you would go to, they displayed this paywall where you could directly pay into it. So you could subscribe through the paywall. And this was very interesting because it was a very new in terms of payment facilitation. It was very easy and very digital friendly. So they actually had many subscriptions that were working through this paywall. And the third thing that they did is that they changed the wording on their paywall from something very frustration-based, like this content is restricted to subscribers, to something very turned on their value proposition and what would be the reader benefit if they subscribe. So by changing the three things, they really improved their conversion rate, and I think it was a very good example here in Europe.
Nice, fantastic. Peter and Esther, do you remember a couple of weeks ago when we did our special subscriptions-based podcast episode, I said that I'd come up with a solution that would solve all the media, the media industry's ills for subscriptions. You remember I said that? Well, it turns out that's just what Danik N's doing. I didn't come up with that at all. Unless they stole that from me and implemented it years ago, I don't know. So we're moving on now to platforms. And Carol, I know that BuzzFeed has historically driven huge quantities of traffic from Facebook, but how has its focus shifted in recent years? And, how are you actually going about finding and experimenting with audiences on those kind of new and upcoming platforms?
Yeah, I think the great thing about BuzzFeed, you forget that it was actually around before the iPhone even existed. And I think what the key thing with us is that we move where the audience is. So we're obsessed with our audience, and therefore we follow them. So we picked up very quickly that TikTok was going to be huge for like Gen Z, millennials, absolutely huge. So we actually moved on to TikTok very, very early and adopted it very early. And what's huge, and it's spoke about so much internally within BuzzFeed Inc., is vertical videos. They're absolutely, like in the US, the UK, obsessed with vertical videos because that's the preferred medium for the younger audience. That's what everyone's doing. So, obviously very quickly, Meta got on board with Instagram Reels because they saw how big it was on TikTok, and vertical videos for us is absolutely huge. And TikTok, even though, and interestingly enough, and this is what BuzzFeed do very well, we've moved before even sort of the monetization's there, and even before the measurements there, we're doing it first because again we want to be the first people to it, the first people to experiment with it. And we've put out, I think this last Q3, we put out 5,000 pieces of content on vertical video. Which is double the amount that we did the same time last year, and the views are up 60% quarter on quarter. So you just know where we know where our audience is, and we follow them, and we will go wherever they are, whether it's TikTok, whether it's something new, whether it's anywhere where they go, we go.
Okay, so related to that, I suppose there's been a sort of journey, like Meta has completely cut ties with publishers this year. They've made it quite clear that they don't care. Twitter is, I'm amazed it's lasted to the end of November, but we've got to the end of November and it's still functional. From a publisher, why can't I not say that word? From a publisher perspective, I'll ask this to all three of you. Is there still a value for publishers in having a presence on these platforms, and to what extent do they then chase audiences on those platforms? Like, does it come to a point where you sort of have to say, we've invested enough, we know that this platform is potentially sort of on the way down in the next few years? Or is there still value in sort of, I suppose, chasing where the audiences are going?
That's certainly the case for advertisers on Twitter anyway.
Yeah. Poor Apple today, they got hammered, didn't they? But I think for us, absolutely, like, a lot of publishers rely on like SEO to discover content, but we rely on the platforms. And actually a big part of our business model is being platform agnostic, being able to move around, like I said. But I think we've still got huge audiences on Meta. We've got huge audiences on Twitter. We've got a great relationship actually with Twitter, from a rev share monetization point of view, but it's I think again what you've got to be aware of is just being prepared to pivot, and being prepared to, I hate that word as well, it's so awful, isn't it? But it's being able to move, it's being able to move quickly, and it's being able to again know what's the next big thing, because let's be honest with ourselves, this younger audience, Gen Z, millennials, if they're not on one platform, they're going to be on another, and they just sort of move and they adapt to what their parents aren't on. They're not going to all of a sudden start going to the newsagent and buying the Telegraph or watching, linear TV again. They're just going to move to what the next thing is, and it's just making sure that you're moving with them. And if it isn't Meta, or if it isn't, if it isn't TikTok, if TikTok's banned and no one's allowed to use it in Europe or in the US, like it'll be something else, So I just think it's just making sure that you're one step ahead.
Yeah, I, like a sad git, spent the weekend testing. Everyone's talking about we're going to Mastodon, we're going to Hive Social. Okay, well, I'll check them out. Who's actually on there? And yeah, most of the major most of the major news broadcasters possibly have an account on there, but they're not really using it. I think BBC had sent a few messages on Mastodon, but nothing major. So they've definitely pitched their flags there, but I don't sense any real intent on using it. But that just shows there is still a major dependency on social media to bring in audiences, and that they know they need to be they need to be where people go. And if Twitter does go through the wall, that is going to be a huge impact for media. The amount of journalists that are on there that share ideas, and we like to slag each other off on there, but also great news. It's going to be a huge impact if Twitter goes to the wall, and we're all looking to figure out where do we go next if it does happen.
See, here's the thing: we've for years and years and years, when we've been talking about platforms, we've been talking about them in what they offer to publishers. And Mastodon's big play at the moment seems to be, as Jess was talking about before, kind of those micropayments for publishers. Now, we can't talk about micropayment; we just can't. We don't have the time. But do we think that then the next great tranche of offers from these new platforms is going to be around rev share for publishers, or are we, as we've seen with Meta, just going to see them divest and just kind of wash their hands of anything to do with publishers in the wake of the Australia type rev share deal and everything like that?
I don't think any of these platforms are going to see the scale from publishers that would make that worthwhile. That's why, let's face it, that's why Facebook doesn't care, and it's why Apple didn't care back in the day. And with huge respect to Madhav, who I can see on my screen in the corner, Google only cares to a point. Google's got other stuff to be getting on with, and God love them. That's the platforms make their money from scale. Most publishers these days aren't going to make money from scale. Caroline, I don't know about BuzzFeed anymore. I don't know where you're at in terms of scale, but most publishers are moving towards some form of, not necessarily a niche play, but definitely a limited play.
And so, again, this is a whistle-stop tour through the year, as is the Media Moments 2020 report. So moving on, then we're going to do a quick stop at emerging technology. And Stephen, we were talking about Meta. You were talking about it's throwing all the money at the wall and seeing what sticks approach. But many of those high-profile metaverse experiments have been around brands, have been from brands. So obviously we saw Nikeland on Roblox. We've seen Adidas. We've seen Gucci going all on these platforms for experimentation. Are those efforts going to help drive interest in these platforms? Or are users going to be put off by brand intrusion into what has historically basically just been a gaming medium, do you think?
Oh, I dreaded this question. I think we're all at the point where we're just sick of hearing about it this year. The ones that have, we've just talked about scale. How many of these actual platforms or experiences have really garnered a huge amount of scale? The ones on Roblox seem to do pretty well. Now, that's a game. That's not the metaverse. It's a gaming platform. Most of them, whenever I asked the question, why have you done this? Oh, we felt we had to test and learn, see what it was like, and make sure we were on the platform and figure out how we can grow and engage future audiences. Okay, fair enough. I don't know how long this will last. Again, I come back to Meta thinks we'll be doing this in 10 years' time. We're bored of it now. So brands, yeah, okay, it's good that they're probably trying something, but I don't see it being where all the marketing budget's going to go. And it will just be an added part of the marketing mix. It won't be, I don't think there's going to be any great scale on this anytime soon.
Karen, I've got one for you then, because BuzzFeed, you said they were before the iPhone. They were very, very quick to digital and social publishing. As far as we can see, unless I've missed some press releases, they've been quite hesitant to try anything like NFTs or the metaverse. But is there promise in these kind of platforms, or do publishers like yourselves need to see users see some actual ROI before committing to building like BuzzFeed in the metaverse?
So it's not a huge play for us, and it's not it's not number one priority. However, last year we bought Complex, and with Complex there's two key events that take place throughout the year, and actually one of them was last week in Long Beach, which is Complex Con. Kanye West actually crashed it. We had to chase him out of the event. It was absolutely mental. And so Complex Con is one, and the other one is Complex Land, which is all done in the metaverse. So it's all around culture. So it's music, it's sneakers, it's all sorts of street culture. And that actually launched during the pandemic as a response to not being able to do things, in the physical world. And that's huge. That's on its third year now and is doing really, really well. So that's Complex Land. And then the other one that we've just done is with Tasty. So we've just launched Mega Tasty in Meta Horizons. So that's about, recipes and cooking experiences and everything that you can do sort of within this virtual world. I can't say that I'm a huge knowledge expert in this space, but that's where BuzzFeed incur at the minute. But Tasty is an interesting one, and I think it's all about communities, isn't it? And it's experimenting and it's new. And I just think as long as you're not overwhelmed by making money straight away, and you're just doing it to build experience, to experiment, to see what works, I think that's going to be the best thing to do in this space for the time being.
Virtual recipes. I thought I'd had it all.
Oh, I see. You've never played Cooking Mama. So yeah, I think that and this might be somewhat controversial here for the rest of the panel, and particularly my co-hosts, but I think that's exactly right. You need to be experimenting on these platforms. Maybe not the ones like Decentraland, or I can't remember the name of the really high-end exclusive one yet, but having a presence there, knowing what is possible, that's how you get down the road to the point where you can actually make some money off this. That's where audiences might potentially end up. And having that expertise doesn't just help commercially, it helps editorial as well when you come in to create that content. We've got a question here. Haven't heard any comments regarding YouTube. Where does this platform play in the distribution strategy for publishers? Obviously, Media Voices, we put out our episodes on there, but for wider sort of publishers, is it now just a kind of a distribution method for content that is created for other platforms? Or are we seeing anybody who's doing anything particularly innovative and exclusive to YouTube? Can we think of any examples from the past year?
In terms of, because I think this is the thing. So in Media Moments, we tend to focus on things that have particularly changed in the industry. And actually what's changed with YouTube this year has been the podcasting strategy, hasn't it? Because there was that report earlier in the year that said that YouTube was the most popular platform for podcast listening, which I think threw quite a lot of people. And we've subsequently put Media Voices on YouTube and have been sort of oddly surprised at some of the results. But I think, again, that has YouTube's podcasting success has surprised YouTube. And when we spoke to them, they're like, yeah, we're sort of, trying to make it a bit easier for people who want to listen to podcasts, maybe on the go. But I don't know if that's just because it's such a destination of everything else, podcasts have just sort of naturally become popular on there. I mean, Chris, you definitely are more into YouTube than I am, and I don't understand that at all.
Yeah, no, I'm never off it. It's becoming a real problem for me, actually. So I think that as we come to the end of the discussion, because we only have a couple of minutes left, if we could maybe go around our guests and ask them, what are you most excited about coming into 2023? Is it new formats? Is it new revenue models? Ludivine, what would you say are you most excited about from the sort of the publisher perspective coming into the new year?
Yeah, I think we're growing in very competitive and fast-moving market. So I would say what I'm most excited about is that publishers will probably have to do better than applying a lot of content restriction from a subscription perspective, and definitely improving their user experience up to conversion. So I think we will definitely witness very high quality marketing strategies over the next few months. And I'm also very excited to see all the different use cases that will come up to retain your current subscriber base.
Perfect. Thank you. And Carolyn?
So I've got 4, but I'll do them very, very quickly and very, very briefly. So I think one is the creator space. I think it's going to be really interesting to see with the change in social platforms, where they go and what's going to happen with them. And actually BuzzFeed are doing a lot of work in that space. I think 2 is collaboration. I think that more media owners more than ever are going to come together and work together. We've seen it with ITV and Channel 4 working on Specsavers, and we've seen it with loads of different examples that would never have happened like years before. And then wider, interested about digital measurement, what's going to happen with that and where that's going to go, because certainly the CPM, CPVs have got to go, and where that space is going to head in the next year. And then lastly, I'm really interested to see what Apple are going to do in the ad world, because they're clearly going to move into like a TV space, like with their DSP that they're launching. So I'm really curious to watch Apple as well. So I don't know whether it's like excited, but just interested is probably the better word. So thank you.
Fair enough. And Stephen, are you excited about anything? You seemed quite cynical throughout the course of the hour.
Me, cynical? Never. Obviously, I'm very excited by Yahoula. That's going to be fantastic. I'm going to echo what Ludivine said. I think the most exciting thing is audiences and subscribers are going to win out of this, because publishers, we're all going to have to work so much harder and offer even better products in order to keep their loyalty and grow loyalty. So I think what will be interesting to see is exactly what comes from the innovation in order to do that. But I think when the consumer wins, it's actually a good thing at the end of the day.
Chris, it's just worth saying in the chat, Madhav's posted a video for telling people how news organisations can get started on YouTube. But just in case anyone's not looked at the chat, that's in there if they want to grab it.
Nice. Fantastic. Well, thank you to our guests for coming, and thank you to everyone who's been watching along as well. All the audio from this will be available as a podcast in and of itself, coming out next Monday. Please do check out the Media Voices podcast, where we talk about this almost every week with a couple of hiatuses. But yeah, the report will be in your inboxes very, very shortly. We'll put show notes together so you can find our amazing panel. And thank you again to Membership and Subscription Suite Poool for their support of not just this report, but for the entire podcast season, of which we're at the end. You can listen to all 10 deep dive episodes into the topics we cover in the report by going to voices.media or searching Media Voices wherever you listen to podcasts. But one of the things that we love about Poool, before we move on, is the industry knowledge that they have and that they share. So they have a team of consultants like Ludivine who support publishers in using the tools and optimization strategies, and also have recently launched, as she mentioned, the Audiences, which has loads of content on everything to do with engagement, conversion, and retention. You can find out more by going to Poool, which is POOOL.tech, or you can follow the Audiences at theaudiences.com.
We've had so many outtakes of that in the episode, haven't we? And I'll just say to people that are left, please do stay in touch. We at Media Voices do a daily newsletter you can subscribe to for the top 4 media stories each day. We also do weekly analysis and more deep dive reports coming next year. So that's all over at voices.media or at Media Voices Pod, as long as Twitter is still alive.
Okay, so that will be until, 5:15 this afternoon. So we'll be back with a new series of the podcast in January, after a well-earned Christmas break. We hope you enjoyed the report. We hope that you have enjoyed this session, and please do stick around, because we're going to be talking about this for, fingers crossed, many months and years yet. But for now, thank you so much for listening, and goodbye.